For the artists, for the passionate. Welcome to the Adventures Elsewhere podcast. Alright, hello everyone and welcome back to the Adventures Elsewhere podcast. Or welcome if it's your first time. I am your host, Jay Black, and today I'm covering a topic I've seen a lot of talk about lately. I'm talking how to write faster. And the reason I wanted to cover this, well, there are a couple. I've been doing a lot of work on this lately and basically throughout my entire writing career. Throughout the podcast I've been pretty open about I get frustrated about how slow I draft, but also there have been some really terrible takes going round about this lately with how much talk there is of it. So I want to get out of the way right off the bat. You do not have to be a plotter to write fast. You do not. You also do not have to write every day in order to write fast. You do not. I do neither of these things, and yet throughout my writing career, my writing speed has sped up. I mean, practically exponentially. You do not have to be a plotter. Do not listen to people who are really, really insistent about it. It works for some people, and it doesn't for others. If it doesn't work for you, that does not mean you're a bad writer, or you're unprofessional, or anything else. The real key to writing faster is to find your process. What I'm going to do this episode is I'm going to take several things that people talk about and things that I've tried and go through how they work, why they work, what the theory is behind this, and sort of alternative versions of these so that you can have some better chance of finding your process and actually hear how and when these things can make sense. Because writing sprints are the number one, where you hear people say, oh, just do writing sprints. And it's kind of a weird thing, and I actually always used to hate this. Because the thing people talk about is, oh, well, just, find some time, grab your phone, set a timer, and just write. And it always felt very artificial to me. I never liked that. But then one time I was on a train, and I had sort of looked at the journey in advance, as you do, to make sure I could, actually get to the damn place I was trying to go to. And I thought, well, I'm going to be sat on the train for like half an hour, then I've got to change train and be sat for another half an hour, and what am I actually gonna do in that time? And I thought, well, you know what, why don't we try doing a writing sprint in that time, because it's actually a decent amount of time. For one, it's not like 10 minutes where you might spend the first 5 sort of getting into it, which was always a problem I had as well. And there's also an actual real pressure to get it done as well, because you've got enough time to get into it, and the pressure of if you don't get it done, or you need to be done by this time, or you're going to miss your stop. And I found that actually really, really worked, because it just felt that much more natural. And another way you could do this if you don't commute on a train or something like that is while you're doing laundry. Put a load of laundry on and then write while it's going, because when it's done it needs to be, hung out to dry or put in the dryer or whatever, depending on what it is and if it's raining outside or not. Or, again, another way you could handle this is if you're cooking and you've got a curry chugging on the stove and it needs to chug for half an hour, writing sprint time. It's a really easy way of getting writing into your day in a way that doesn't necessarily take away from anything else, because this is something else I've heard people talk about, is, well, I can write, or I can do the dishes, or something like that, and this is sort of is the best of both worlds in many ways, if you can make it work. And you might find that this doesn't work for you, and actually you like to do all of your chores sort of semi-simultaneously, get a load of laundry going, clean the bathroom, put it in the dryer, and then, sort of do it all at the same time. And yeah, that's fair enough. So the sort of alternative is write once everything's done. Once you've dealt with all of the things you need to deal with for the day, maybe that, after everything's done, maybe that's a good time to write. It's a bit freer. There's no time limit on it, because sometimes a time limit works, sometimes it doesn't. I have a weird mix of both on that one, where I found writing sprints on the train, that worked, but generally I like to be able to stay up until 2 a.m. writing, though I'll get into that more later. So that's practical, like, actual, more natural writing sprints, and I think it's a better way of doing it than with a timer, to be honest. The other one you see a ton of talk about is having aesthetic boards and mood boards. And this is a really Marmite one. Some people love this, and some people hate it, and I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with this one. Because there are times I've found these really helpful, and times I've thought, this is a complete waste of fucking time. And a lot of the time, when I do make mood boards, it's me just trying to not, like, actually write a project. It's me trying to do something that feels related, just so I can then put it back in its proverbial box. But I think the time when... I think this can be helpful for a lot of people. You wouldn't see so many people harping on about it. And I think something like a mood board can be really helpful if you're a visual thinker, and you need lots of visuals for things. You want to think, okay, how do I describe this building? Let's find reference images, or okay, how do I nail this vibe? Let's find some images. I think that then makes a lot of sense. What I found, personally, is that this is a very genre-specific thing. Because I've talked before on this podcast about writing noir, and that is something I'm actively working on at the minute. I've got a noir novelette. And I found that having a mood board for that actually does help, because noir is such an aesthetic genre, and there's so much sort of precision of things like lighting, in particular, in noir is really, really important. So having a sort of visual reference for that, I actually found really helpful. I've talked about this part before as the alternative. Concept art, character art. Personally, I find that much more universally useful. Other people, again, this might be a sort of visual, not visual thinker thing, though I don't know that I'll class myself as particularly visual. Concept art helps me a lot, just if I'm getting stuck, because as an artist, it makes you think about things a bit differently. You think more about what clothes people are wearing and how that looks, and, oh wait, hang on, how did they get this? Why do they wear this? Is their style like this? How's their hair? It makes you think about different things, and sometimes that's the ticket you need. And if you're commissioning an artist, they will ask you all of these questions too, so you don't have to be an artist to get a gain out of that. So another one you see people talk about a lot is writing to music, having, the playlist. And yeah, I mean, mixed feelings about this one at this point. I used to swear by this. I have a whole episode about this, and I was, singing the praises of this. I have mixed feelings about it now. I think it can be really helpful for nailing vibes. That's the thing. If you've got a set vibe that you want to stick to, that's really useful. I find the playlists are much more helpful in editing now. For me, this has become an editing tool, much more than it's become a drafting tool. So yes, still very valuable, but definitely more on the edit side. The other thing that I think people sort of don't consciously realise that they like about writing to music is that it drowns out other noise, be that construction work that I've been dealing with today because I live next to a building site, or, just traffic, or dogs, kids outside screaming for whatever reason. I think a lot of people get a lot of value out of just screening that out with other noise. And so I raised to you the point of potentially just wearing noise cancelling headphones. Like, I have noise cancellers and they do not a perfect job, but a pretty good job of that. Also, white noise. A lot of people who are like the people younger than me, a lot of like the generation below me, or 2 generations below, I'm never quite sure where I sit, I'm in a bit of a funny spot. They swear by studying to white noise. And again, I think this is the sort of drowning out everything thing. I've never been able to get a clear explanation out of them on this one, but they swear it works. And I've not tried this, but I suspect writing to white noise could work. It's definitely worth a go if you are that way inclined. Maybe you've tried studying to white noise, try writing to it, maybe. It might feel too academic, but then again, some of you might like that. I don't know. Food for thought on that one. So now I'm going to move on to things that I found really work for me. So I think I might have a whole episode about this somewhere back on the channel. I'm talking about the right tea. Now I have in brackets or incense, I'll come back to that. Because the idea of this is that it's immersive. So you have, for me, the taste of something that's relevant. And for Miss Nakagami, that was jasmine green tea. Haru wears jasmine perfume, so jasmine was directly relevant. For Snakebite, it was Lapsang Souchong tea, because it's smoky and Hanzo smokes, so that just made sense to have that sort of sensory input there. And I think incense can do exactly the same thing. Perhaps you have more of a focus on smells than taste. I don't have a particular focus on smells, me as a person, so I don't know that worked for me, but it's the same concept. So that could, and it can be about just this immersion and how much that helps, because genuinely it really does for me. There can also be a spiritual element to it, if you need to be in a spiritual space to write, if there's a big element of spirituality to it for you. And again, vibes. Like, vibes do make a difference. This is the immersion side of things again. Playlist and tea, playlist and incense. Having a mood board as well, depending on how you think, that can all make a difference. The sort of logical extension of this is just make sure you're comfortable when you're writing. Make sure that you have a comfortable place to sit. Maybe a blanket if it's cold, or if, again, that just shuts out the world a bit. And again, I've seen people talk about this a lot, and some people swear by it, sitting on something like a hard wooden chair or a stool that's uncomfortable. I've seen a lot of people swear by that, especially editors. So you can go either way with that one. I think combining things is probably where the magic really happens. I'm going to come back to that actually. So then we get into genuine, pretty deep changes to processes here. It's not just about, okay, we'll just write in sprints, or have this on in the background. We're getting into slightly deeper things here. And again, I have, I think, more than one episode dedicated to why I handwrite my books. But I do, and I will swear by this to my dying day at this point, really, that handwriting is worth trying. Maybe it doesn't work for you, but if you've never tried it, and you've been looking for a sign, as they say on the socials, this is it. Seriously. And this is for one reason only, and that is distractions. You just have a pad of paper and a pen. Not the same as writing on a laptop where, you just say, oh wait, hang on, I just need to check the food shop, or wait, do I need, this thing, and open the browser, or, just anything else. Just pad of paper and a pen, and there are far fewer distractions. And the other thing I find with handwriting, as well, digital drafting in particular, I have a real problem with wanting to press all the buttons. This isn't something I've seen anybody else talk about, but I can't be alone in this. I refuse to believe it. Please don't make me think I'm alone in this. But if I'm digitally drafting, I always want to italicize things, or change the font, or change the color, or find some way to be meta clever at the expense of A, actually writing the damn thing, and B, making sure that the story actually is good and going somewhere. And I found this when I did an AU, it was really cursed, a while back, just because I just sat down and thought, I want to just experiment with an AU, and I did that digitally just because it was what I had to hand. And when I tell you there are italicizations and bolding and font changes and colour changes everywhere, I mean it. It is actually terrible. And it went so slowly at first note. And I was like, why am I writing so slow? And I was like, oh, I'm doing the thing. And then I sort of tried to rein it in, but the urge was still there. And it's like, handwriting, you just don't have any of that. It's just less complicated, and there's a lot to be said for that, I think. Another one I've talked about on this podcast before, though much more recently, is multitasking. I have found over numerous years doing just about anything, I concentrate better when I'm doing more than one thing at once. So often when I'm podcasting, I'll have music on in the background, though that's more of a coping mechanism. I talked about that in my anniversary of the podcast episode if you want the detail on that. I'm not really sure why it took me so long to think that multitasking while writing would be a good thing for me, given how well it works for just about everything else. But anyhow, I kind of swear by this at this point. And the way I do it, and I know it sounds batshit, I've said it before, I play video games while I'm writing, and it works. And I appreciate that might not be the multitasking that anybody else wants to do. Maybe you're just not a gamer, or you just think it sounds too weird. How about something like crochet or embroidery, where you can just do a line of stitches, a line of crochet hooks, or knitting would be the same. I don't know much about crochet if you can't tell. And then you can write another sentence. You write for a bit, you need to think, okay, we'll do another, set of embroidery or thread some needles, and it's the same idea. It still works. The alternative for this is just to have a completely empty room, empty corner. If you can't manage a whole room, just something with absolutely zero distractions. Maybe that works better. The main thing I would say about any of this is that combining different elements is where things really start to happen. That's when you get into a real groove around all this stuff. The individual things will make an amount of difference if they work, but combining them together is where you get a much bigger effect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk you through my drafting process, how I go about doing this. So I write every other day, generally. Sometimes I will write on consecutive days, but I actively try not to do that most of the time, because what I find is I write significantly less on those days than I would if I just wrote every other day. Writing every other day, I write an amount that is more than if I wrote 2 days in a row. So I find that works better for me. I couldn't tell you exactly why that is, but it works. And generally on the off days, I'll be editing instead. And that'll be editing a completely different project. And I find that works really, really well. And while I'm writing, I'll be playing Inscription 99 times out of 100. I love Inscription. I have an insane number of hours in that game at this point. No, I still haven't beaten challenge mode level 12. It's just fucking mean. But it has a really good vibe to it, especially for Shadow on the Snow and Beneath the Moon, which are the two that I'm working most on at the moment. Well, Shadow on the Snow by far, but it has a really good vibe for that. And I talked about this a bit on the Count the Stars episode, that Catch the Stars had a really good vibe for that, so it's partly playing a game that isn't super involved, like if it was Breath of the Wild or something like that, you're just doing too much constantly for it to work. So something that's slightly more turn-based stroke arcade works a lot better, but again, vibes matter. I write in the evening and into the night because I find that is a good time for me. I don't have other commitments at that point. I'm a bit of a night owl, and it just works. I do, if I'm on trains and things, writing sprints, yes, but that's not a particularly regular thing for me at the moment. It might become more regular in future, in which case I'll be doing more of it, but the vast majority of writing I'm sure will still get done evening, nighttime. And I handwrite everything. I swear by it. Always have done, really, throughout my entire writing career, and I'm sure I always will. Handwriting is the way to go for me. And like I said, throughout this episode, I have tried every single thing on this list in some capacity or other. And you do need to stick with things. You do need to try things more than once to know if they do work. 99 times out of 100. The video game thing for me, the multitasking thing, that worked instantly. And handwriting worked instantly. Everything else took a bit of time to get into, but I don't mean I'll do it for 3 months, and if it still doesn't work, you'll have a pretty good idea pretty quickly. To be honest, between, I don't know, 3 and 7 writing sessions, you'll know if it's working for you or if it's not, probably. Would be my view. Try doing 3 writing sessions with a playlist if you haven't. If you find it works, keep at it. If it doesn't, then don't. Try something else. But I think for me, the way I've grown and written faster, the number one thing is to just keep an open mind. Try different things. Maybe you try multitasking with a video game and it doesn't work. That doesn't necessarily mean you should strike multitasking altogether. Maybe you just need something else, like knitting or crochet or embroidery or whatever else you think of. Maybe you need that instead. Maybe it doesn't work for you, but in occasion, it's a bit like with playlists. It might not work for you at first because you're listening to the wrong music while you're writing. You might need hip-hop for one thing, you might need jazz for another, you might need thrash metal for something else. Keep an open mind, try a lot of things. If you find more than one thing that works, try combining them and see how much further that takes you. But you don't need to outline. You don't need to plot. Maybe that works for you, maybe it doesn't. You certainly don't have to write every day. It's about finding what works for you, and the only way to really truly do that is to try things, is to experiment. And I'd be surprised, honestly, I'd be really surprised if you tried all of the things on this list and none of them worked for you. And if things don't work, well, you haven't lost anything. What you've done is rule something out. You're one step closer to finding the thing that does work. But I think that's about all for today, so it's time to do the bits of housekeeping at the end. If you're published or on the way, please get in touch. I would love to be a part of your publishing journey, you can do that via email. My email's on the screen. There's no genre restrictions, no age category, no nothing. Whatever you've got, bring it in. The only thing I ask is that you're indie or self-pub. You're the people I want to hear from. And if you're looking for me elsewhere, if you're here, you're probably looking for Instagram, because that is the home of the podcast. That's where you'll get advance notice of what the episode of the week is. I'm also doing ever more like indie book hype on there, so if I just see an indie book thing that looks cool or sounds cool, chances are it'll end up on my story or something. So if you're looking for podcast home and indie book hype, Instagram, I'm Jade_Black21 on there. If you want to know more about my writing, semi-live updates, and join my monthly Thrills Prompts community, big anniversary of that coming up, by the way, head over to Twitter. I'm JadeBlack21 on there. And if you're looking for more stuff about art and world building, Pinterest is the place to be. I'm Jade_Black21 on there. And until next time, you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a like. It helps the channel a lot. Intro and outro music by me. Copyright Jade Black 2024.